Hello and welcome to the Play Creators Conference and this, the Sustainability and Toy Panel session. I'm Helena Mansell-Stopher, the founder of Products of Change, an organisation created to drive real sustainable change within the brand and licensing industry. And I'm extremely lucky to be chairing this panel today and joined by some fantastic people leading change within the industry. We've got Kaufman, who is Senior Vice President of Technical Affairs at the Toy Association. Hey Al.
Hello.
We've got Valeria Miglioli, Creative Director at Pumpkin Projects. Hey Valeria.
Hello.
And we've got Yesim Kunter, who is Play Expert and Play Futurist.
Hello.
And for me, really, to have a cross-section of experts across the industry is truly exciting, because if we're really going to drive sustainable change, we can't do this all on our own. We kind of all have to hold hands and figure out how we kind of really look at driving change throughout the full system if we're going to drive change. So for me, it's exciting to have you here. So thank you. Now, first of all, we know that everybody at home is going to want to understand how you got started in the world of toys and games, and also just what your current role is. So Al, I don't know if you want to kick us off.
Sure, I'd be happy to. As Helena said, I'm currently Senior Vice President, Technical Affairs for the Toy Association. I got involved in the industry more years ago than I'd care to admit. But actually got into it the way a lot of people do. I got into it by accident. I graduated with a degree in biology with a minor in organic chemistry, and was looking around for something in my chosen field. And in the meantime, I just took a job at Mattel in the reliability laboratory, breaking toys for a living. And it went on from there. I ended up at Mattel for about 5 years, going through the product safety group, became a product safety engineer, worked for a variety of toy companies, most of which don't exist anymore. And some of them you might recognize: Coleco, LJN. I worked for the Disney organization for 13 years, handling both technical services and sourcing, and also was with Toys R Us for a 5-year stretch before I joined the Toy Association. Current role is primarily to provide technical support to our advocacy efforts, or at least that's the official job description, but it really involves a little of everything: product safety standards, sustainability, obviously, working with foreign governments as they propose requirements for toys, to advocate for something that makes sense in many cases. In the sustainability sphere, we've over the last several years developed a number of tools for our members that we can talk about as we get into this. So thank you.
Wow. Valeria?
Well, my background is in industrial design. I studied in Italy. My idea when I went to do this degree was to design sofas and lights like everybody does. And then within the first few months, I realized actually I needed something more creative, more challenging. And that's by chance, again, I did my first design was this structure, sort of a desk turned into toy made out of cardboard. And that's when I was like, well, actually, this is the kind of design I want to do. And then since then, everything I did was to do with children, with toys or accessories or furniture, everything like that. So that ended up being a main thing on my design path, let's say. My degree was this playground. I made this multi-sensory, sustainable playground. And I did lots of research with schools, with education specialists. So this idea of learning, and then the concept of free play, and this kind of a play for children is what's been what has been driving my practice since. I then moved to London, and that's where I work with MPD Partnership, which is a design inventor studio. That was my first experience in a proper toy design industry, and I was hooked, and that's definitely what I wanted to do. I then worked for Fiesta Crafts for many years, starting from designer, working my way up to head of design and product development manager, which in a small company is so much, from research to sorting out production. So that really gave me a great understanding of everything is involved in bringing a product or an idea to market. And the end of last year, I decided that it was time for me to set up on my own and use my skills and really push what I believe is important now, which is sustainability, which is really looking at children play and looking at the longevity of the toy market. And that's now the moment I'm working with international companies and with individuals and helping, so as a consultant base, as well as design and research, and trying to find the best way forward.
Yeah. So interesting. Yesim, what about you?
Well, I really deliberately choose to be a toy designer. I always wanted to be a toy designer. So, and also I wanted to study more understanding about the child psychology. I ended up being at FIT, and I finished the toy design program. And then I worked for Alex Craft, and then I worked for Toys R Us. And then I moved to Denmark to work for Lego for a while. And then I moved to London to work for Hasbro for about 7 years. And I was a futurist for them. So looking at 5 to 10 years ahead, it was amazing role, I have to say. And I had the chance and also luck to work with like MIT Media Lab and all of these to create next generation learning platforms. And that actually led me to be very much interested in play in general, not just toys, but in general about the play behavior and how it actually impacts our learning and creativity. And so I started my own consultancy about 8 years ago, and I've been doing a lot of play related research from adults to children, to understand where it is heading to, because what I really believe in is actually sustainable play. That's what I would say. And so that's where I am right now.
Wow, so fascinating. Al, I'm going to come to you first with my next question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Over the last 2 years, consumers have really become increasingly aware of all of the plastic problems. We've seen David Attenborough, Greta Thunberg. In the UK, we've seen a lot through the BBC and War on Plastic. And actually, during COVID, it's been impacted even more just with throwaway PPE. And I guess a lot of retailers going back to using more plastic, actually, even though it's arguable if actually is that better or not for COVID. With 95% of toys actually being made from plastic, and obviously we've got all of the packaging on top of that. I know that you mentioned some of the tools that you've been implementing at the Toy Association. It'd be quite interesting to see what initiative you've seen come through the industry to kind of really try and drive positive change when it comes to plastics and packaging, because I guess that's a good place to start when it comes to driving change as a whole industry.
Absolutely, be happy to talk about that. And I think we've made some real strides over the last few years. First of all, I think, I think it's important to understand that, from a life cycle standpoint, plastics, very often are the most sustainable solution, although their public perception does not match that. And, I think certainly there's a plastics waste issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah. So, we have, for instance, we've signed on to the Clean Sweep program that the Plastics Industry Association is involved in to try to make sure that waterways are not polluted with nurdles, fugitive plastic pellets, from the manufacturing process. we also have developed a tool called the Smart Packaging Initiative tool, which we'll get into in a minute. Likewise, I think toys are subject to what I would call the Christmas morning effect. I think parents, look at all of the discarded packaging on Christmas morning when their children have ripped all of the packaging up, and I think that contributes to a perception that toys are overly packaged and that there's a lot of waste. Our colleagues at the British Toy and Hobby Association actually did a study, and toys over the course of a year account for far less than 1% of the average household waste stream. So not a major contributor to the problem, but we do feel that everybody has a part to play, and so we think there's, we need to move forward along with everyone else. We've developed several tools. One is we have a materials database, which is relatively small at this point, but we're hoping to expand it. And what it does is if and there are materials for both products and packaging. If a designer has the ability to utilize numerous materials that will meet their performance specifications, what we've done is give them what the footprint is, the environmental footprint of those materials are, so that they can hopefully select a less impactful material. We also, with the, and I have to give a shout out here to the Disney organization, because they shared it with us, and they were very supportive in helping us get our version of the tool up and running. The Smart Packaging Initiative tool allows packaging designers for toys, and the way it works, first of all, you have to select a category, and so as you select that category and then go into the details of your packaging, what materials you're using, how much weight is there, how much recycled content, the tool will actually do several things. It will make suggestions for how you can potentially improve that score. It will give you a score on a scale of 1 to 100, which is rated against everyone else in the industry that is producing that same product category, so that whether, if you're 50, your average for the industry. If you're 80, you're well ahead, and you also know if you're falling behind. The nice thing about that is that it's a moving target. It drives continuous improvement, because as everyone tries to improve their score, then the average score moves up, and you also have to continuously improve your product to be able to just stay in place. So we're very happy about that tool. As I said, takes into account a number of sustainability factors. How much recycled content is there? Are there any mixed materials that would make recycling difficult? Is it possible to downweight? Is it possible to reuse the packaging? All of those will either increase or decrease the score, depending on how that operates. We also have a very active environmental sustainability committee. It's currently chaired by Lego, by someone who has a background in sustainability, and what we try to do is make sure that some of the best practices that our larger members are able to do on their own, because they have the bandwidth and the expertise, it gets socialized to the smaller members who may not be able to do this on their own. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish as a trade association. You could probably count on 2 hands the large members that we have, and it very quickly drops off to many, many smaller members. About 80% of our membership are small and medium enterprises, and they simply don't have the bandwidth. We need to do that for them. We need to hand them tools that they can utilize to make their specific products much more sustainable. So we have provided those for them, and we do hold regular webinars, making sure that it stays top of mind for people.
Totally. And is that a global tool? Is that used globally?
Yes, it is. It's anyone who is a member. We're also in discussions with potentially offering that tool to our partners at the Toy Industries of Europe. We really would like to have this thing utilized almost universally, because we think it is a great tool.
Well, totally. If you look at that, if you look at the world of fashion, and you've got the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, and they've created something similar called the Hig Index. So anybody that's within fashion can input what materials they're using, and it brings you out score. And then it then provides you with solutions if you want to have a better carbon footprint or have a better solution for a different material. I think if we're able to, because I didn't know that your tool existed, and I think there's probably lots of other partners that don't know that tool exists, and I think it'd be great to find a way to drive that conversation.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we actually, I'm familiar with the Hig Index and the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's Material Sustainability Index. We've had some conversations with SAC, and what we'd ultimately like to do is maybe migrate our database to that sustainability index, because we think that would not only benefit other industries who could utilize our information, but then we gain the benefit of other materials that wouldn't necessarily be something we would normally get involved in, like textiles.
Yeah, like a plush, for you to be able to give that information out to the toy manufacturers that are creating textiles products, and for them to be able to benefit from the great work that you've done within your packaging as well. That's fantastic. Look forward to hearing more about that.
Yeah, that's an ultimate goal. Unfortunately, it's been sort of it's been slow because of, frankly, we're a small organization. Our external affairs group is only 7 or 8 people, so it hasn't moved as quickly as I'd like to see it move.
Well, hopefully, by the time we do the Play conference next year, there'll be more updates.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Valeria, I'd like to come to you with this one. So looking at new plastics such as sugarcane and cornstarch, as well as additives like breakdown plastics, they're kind of just some of the new innovations that are coming through. Yeah. It's really interesting because you're kind of on the front line of creating and bringing innovation forward of kind of what new toys might look like. Are you seeing these new materials kind of being presented to you from factories maybe in the Far East or locally? I just wonder how much of some of these new innovations are coming forward and how quickly they're coming forward.
Well, you see these materials more and more. Personally, I don't do much plastic as such. So my background is more with textile and with wooden products. So you think there is is a safe area, but then it's like polyester is as bad as any other plastic, really. So there's a lot of work being done on that sort of material. So obviously you have your bioplastics, you have biodegradable plastics, but there's pro and cons to everything. So there's mainly the cost issues and availability. So that I think is what is the main issue, especially for smaller companies. And companies that have to rely on their suppliers to be able to use these sort of materials. They don't have the possibility to drive the change like somebody like Lego or Mattel would do, or they've been doing anyway. And then from a fabric point of view, we see there's a lot of possibilities. There's like silk substitutes. You can use a pineapple leaf fiber. There's this company in Italy. They've been producing this material that with using the grape skins. So it's a byproduct of the wine industry, and they made this fabric is basically like leather, and they actually made some like line for H&M. So the things are there, but is that how available are they to the toy industry, and how much do companies think is worthwhile investing in developing this sort of things? I think that is the problem. And you have some lovely startups that's how they enter the market. That's what we're going to use. That's how they focus, what they focus on. But for smaller company, I think it's going to be hard to change the way they've been doing things for many years to these new materials. And I say, well, I was saying about that sharing knowledge, I think is at the base of all of these, because it's only stretching these across the all or the industry, from the raw material suppliers to the factories, all the way down to the consumers. That's the only way we can make a meaningful change, I think.
Totally.
And if I can jump in on that topic, yeah, we also are monitoring what's going on here, and I think there are, I think Valeria, you know, outlined the issues very clearly. It really comes down to cost, performance, and also availability. You know, for instance, if you're Coca-Cola, you have enough buying power that you can make sure that your PET bottles are, you know, plant-based or at least partially plant-based. A little more difficult when you're a small toy manufacturer to source that material. Although, you know, we do continue to you know, to monitor what's happening, and we would like to see a shift away from petroleum-based sources. You know, at least to be able to source plastics that we use today, but source them from a renewable resource rather than from petrochemicals. And then also we keep an eye on the new plastics. For instance, PLA is not quite there from a performance standpoint, but we're hopeful that we'll get there.
And what do you think of the recycled plastic? So if we could get a better infrastructure in place to bring those materials back in use, rather than using a new virgin plastic, whether it be a plant-based plastic or not, do you see the infrastructure coming? Is there desire from manufacturers? I know that supply will be an issue as well, because we have to build that new infrastructure to do that.
I would certainly hope so. I mean, we do have some members who, you know, the issue is really making sure that you've secured a source of clean, recycled material that you know, of known content, because toys are subject to, you know, both, you know, very stringent performance requirements from a mechanical standpoint. You know, for instance, here in the US, a toy for under 18 months has to survive a 54-inch drop test 10 times without yielding any small parts. And because every time plastic goes through a heat history, it loses some of its performance characteristics, there's a concern that you might not, you know, be as consistent as you would be with virgin material. The other issue is trace chemicals that might be in recycled material that were used for another purpose. For instance, you know, if you get recycled material that was used in a television housing that contains a flame retardant, that's not something that you would like to see in a toy. It's not necessary and it shouldn't be there. So those are the issues, is, you know, really making sure we build that infrastructure so that we can provide consistent, clean streams of recycled material.
So complicated.
Yes.
Yeah, Yesim, so since you've got the most amazing job of being a futurist and looking into kind of what the future looks like, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are on consumer purchasing and just kind of even the changing that. So for example, with COVID, we've seen a huge increase in Amazon and a lot of people getting things delivered online. And I know that I've been reading and looking into a lot of conversation of people talking about, is there going to be 3D printing hubs that pop up? So therefore, you know, not everything is made in China. We're going to have these 3D printing hubs of places throughout Europe or the US or wherever. So you have more manufacturing that becomes locally. And as you get those materials, if they do pass the tests that come through recycled, is manufacturing going to change in the future? Do you see anything like that coming through?
We always foresee that there's going to be some kind of 3D printing. You know, 3D printing, actually, we thought 3D printers are going to be everybody's houses, so that you are actually printing your own, you know, toys. But the most important thing is the content, and how do you actually create that content, because it becomes like a accessory, and how you create that platform is really important in that sense. But I think with the COVID, it's quite interesting. I mean, I know in the beginning of the first, you know, part of the COVID, it became a lot of, you know, toys were being, you know, sold and everything. But I'm a little bit I'm a bit worrying about it, because I don't know what the economical situation of people is going to be, because at that time it was still the beginning and everybody had at least some resources that they could actually spend money on. But I think so sustainability, for that reason, is becoming like consumerism, let's say. It's becoming actually more mindful consumerism, I think.
And Al, do you see that coming through? Because you talk a lot to retail as well, don't you? So do you see retail looking at how they're going to be changing, or toy manufacturers doing things themselves? Do you see any new innovation coming through there?
I think we've seen some, we've seen some moves in that direction. For instance, one of our larger members actually produced a 3D printer, to be sold as an item that you could take home and manufacture your own toys. There are some issues. I think one is that the number of materials that are available are relatively limited, although they're growing. And so there are some performance issues. Also, if you think about the fact that in many cases the 3D printed item is laid down layer by layer, there's an integrity issue sometimes. So I don't think we're quite there yet, but I do think that in the future, certainly on a manufacturing floor, you'll see more use of more 3D printing. I think it's much more flexible. It allows you to produce essentially from anywhere. You don't necessarily have to be offshore, and so you can increase your speed to market and carry less inventory. So I think there are a lot of advantages. I just don't think we're quite there yet.
Yeah, and do you think COVID's kind of revealed a weakness in just the sheer amount that we get produced in the Far East, and kind of not having control over more local manufacturing?
It's funny. I don't necessarily see it as local versus offshore. I think it was that we tended to put all of our eggs in one basket. I mean, 85% of the world's toys were produced in China, and when China went down, it created a real issue. Mm-hmm. So I think we're seeing people start to diversify their supply chains because of, for instance, here in the US, some of the infrastructure just doesn't exist anymore for toy manufacturing. And so it would be very difficult to reshore some of those items. On the other hand, I think there are efforts afoot to make sure that we have multiple source countries that could produce a given product, so that if there is an issue in one country, you're not completely shut off. Your supply chain doesn't go down completely.
Yeah, so interesting. Valeria, with the majority of producers looking at sustainability really at the end of the design process, how important is it for inventors and in-house creators and designers to kind of look at sustainability from the very start, looking at circular design principles, the end of life, and bringing things and products and materials back into the loop? I think, how important do you feel that is, and do you see more designers now looking to do that?
I think more companies are taking these on board, so I would have thought the in-house designer have to look at things that way. I think this eco-design has to be taken into account since from the beginning, from the product and the packaging. Absolutely. The products in general are everywhere, and they are designed. So we have stuff, there is stuff, we're flooded with stuff, but design is the cause, but it can also be the cure for all of this disease of. I think design, it's front and center. You have to think at the whole life cycle of the product. So not just, can we make the box a little smaller? It's also the right, how do we get the raw materials? Can we use byproduct in any way? Can we reuse something? How do we manage the whole process? And there's the water, there's carbon emission, there's so much that we need to consider, and yes, that comes down to the design of the product, but also the kind of products we design. So I don't have anything against plastic toys like Lego or Playmobil. They last forever, and they last tens of years. They get passed down, and the amount of play that children get from it and enjoyment, I can tell that it's fine. My issue is with those throwaway cheap plastic things that don't have a purpose. And I think that's where the design is to go against that sort of things and focus on well design and longevity and quality, and sometimes plastic is the best material to use, but it's a choice being made after looking at the whole design process. Yes.
I see all of us nodding. Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Totally.
In agreement. It's interesting because I think it does come down to the design. Just as you can't design safety and quality into a product afterwards, or excuse me, you can't get it into the product afterwards. You need to be able to incorporate those factors initially as you're doing the design. And I think what we'll see more of is that there will be a sustainability design review in the same way that we currently do quality and safety design reviews, and we make modifications before the product ever gets to the point of doing a prototype.
Totally. Yesim, do you see this coming through as well with some of the
totally.
Yeah.
Especially with fast food companies, the toys they are adding. I mean, that's definitely going to change. We see a lot of changes in that area. Especially countries, their new regulations is also changing. So that's why sustainability basically, it's exactly, I agree. It's like a new safety. That's what you should be thinking. But also we see in the content of the toys themselves as well. There is a mindfulness about the subject of it. The play is even also becoming more sustainable, and also content that they create is also about sustainability and creating awareness for children. So that's also very important. So it's not just creating the product itself in that mindset, but it's also communicating that information. That's also becoming huge. I mean, this year I think it was big. Just before COVID, that was one of the big topic, I think.
Yeah, on communication, actually, Products of Change as an organisation have just released some research which I shared with you before our panel discussion, and actually some of the interesting, and we were asking families and children just on their experience around COVID and what they wanted to buy. But actually one of the interesting questions was kind of what worried them more, COVID or climate change, and this is to children. And actually it was really 50-50. One of the children said that COVID affects humans, but climate change affects everybody. And so that's the next generation of consumers. So they're the kids that are driving and driving that pester power. And I do wonder, and maybe this is for Al as well, is that do you feel that the toy industry could actually lead and educate children when it comes to sustainability and just the materials that are being used? Because we know plastic isn't the devil material, it's how we use it, and that's the impact. Is how do we use the industry to positively communicate to children of what we're doing, and can they get some commonality so it becomes a little bit more it's easier to understand.
I think children are actually asking for it. I don't think it's even we create the impact. I think they are looking for, especially Generation Alpha is very sensitive, and they are very much aware of what's going on. And with the COVID, I think it's just being more exaggerated. Their fear is more, huge. So they are seeing the links between and the connection between the climate change and what we have done. So they are expecting much more purposeful products. So it's kind of like it's exactly what they eat. They are also looking for what they play with. It's almost similar. It needs to be healthy.
Thanks, Al.
I was just going to say, I think that you're absolutely right. I think it's a place where the industry can lead. We actually have done some outreach. For instance, we've traveled to elementary schools and we've talked to children about sustainability. And we also have a consumer-facing website that's separate from our normal Toy Association website that at this point in time has product safety and safe play guidance for consumers, and I can certainly see that being expanded into the sustainability area. I think there's so much misinformation out there. I think it's sometimes hard to cut through the clutter, but I think it's definitely an effort we should make.
I think just to get some commonality across the industry, because even if you look at plastic, just even the numbering of what kind of plastic it is, it's in the little triangle, and it looks like it's recycled, and it's not at all. But nobody's campaigning to not have that numbering, that marking. It'd be quite interesting to kind of see some commonality across the industry where we fully show if something is recycled or a different kind of plastic. I just think that we could communicate differently, and actually as an industry hold hands to kind of really drive this change.
Yeah, frankly, I'd like to see that system expanded. I mean, currently we have too many types of plastic that fall into the number 7 other category, and it makes it very difficult to separate them when it comes to recycling.
Yeah, totally there with you. We're kind of coming to the end of this really fantastic conversation. I could talk about this for hours and hours and hours, and maybe I'll go one-on-one, just kind of looking at what are your hopes for the industry in the next 5 years with really sustainability in mind. So kind of where would you like to see us? And I'm going to go, who's first? So Valeria.
Right, what would I like to see? I think that 5 years ago, we wouldn't have had this conversation. So I hope in 5 years' time, we will need to have this conversation. I really hope that there's going to be a sort of large-scale shift in the industry. And, you know, it's applaudable that companies that are doing something, but these little changes get lost if the majority carry on like as normal. So we need to find a way to make a real big difference. And I was said earlier, I think, and I hope that with collaboration across the industry, that we'll have the best chance to really push these and push the suppliers and the factories to, you know, we saw it with like safety, with azole dyes or that sort of thing. Like years ago, we had all these product with problems, and then, you know, all of these sort of material disappeared because the manufacturers are not accepting it anymore. So I hope this will be a force that will make us or change the way we do things. I can see there's a growing trend in parents considering sustainability as a major thing, and obviously there's cost involved, so we need to educate the end consumer, because, you know, it's easy to say produce things in Europe or use these materials, but then if people at the end are not prepared to pay for this, then that's an issue. So it might be to do, you know, we need to change the culture around it all, and and obviously we all need to make money out of it and make a living out of it, but we'll need to be responsible and change the way we do it for the longevity of the toy industry, but for the future of a species, I say. There's no way back. It's not, you know, we're not gonna, we can't hide this is happening, and we need to do something about it.
You're totally right. And I was having a conversation earlier the week actually with the head of sustainability of Georgia Asda, who is the clothing side of the business. And actually this year all their school uniforms and every single item of school uniform has been sustainably sourced. A really interesting thing about that is they've not increased the price. And they're not using it as a marketing campaign to differentiate themselves from other people. They're actually saying it's their responsibility as a retailer to just do the right thing and not to use it as a competitive advantage. And I think that's fantastic that they're doing that, and I really hope that we see more of that, and that coming through other industries. So the conversation of the margin differentiation hopefully doesn't become an issue, because that there's a way of sorting that out. So actually what comes to the market is just the right thing to do.
Yeah, there's not a cheap alternative.
Yeah.
There shouldn't be a cheaper alternative. That's the way it should be. And we will get used to that. There's the normality. There needs to be a switch in the culture of it, I guess.
Yesim, what
about
Yeah, I think it needs to be a collective way of looking at this. It's not just, you know, the manufacturers or the designers. It's also the you know, the countries and how they are actually supporting each other. You know, how they are going to create these kind of suppliers and everything. Because at the end of the day, if the price is too high, people are not going to be able to afford it, even though if it's an amazing toy. I mean, I love some of the wooden toys, but they are super, super expensive. So it's, you know, and also it comes to the point like, you start to question, is that really sustainable? So I think it's really, I mean, my wish is really in 5 years' time to understand the right material for the right kind of reason, and how you use it and how you design it for the right way of playing, and understanding the playfulness of it, and actually creating really nice quality playtime for children with the right kind of materials, so that they also learn and they also respect what they are doing. And that will be my hope, I think, in 5 years' time.
And Al, I know that with I mean, I think, is the US toy market a quarter or even more of global toys? And so it's kind of, you're in a huge position of power, because the US has got such buying power that if real change is going to happen, and we need to see that come from the US as well, don't we?
We do, and I think, you know, to be honest, I think we've lagged behind in terms of our, you know, our cultural sensitivity as a country to some of these issues. I'm starting to see a shift. I think, you know, 20 years ago, I think we used to routinely see, you know, we would survey consumers and say, would you be willing to pay more for a sustainable product? And they would typically answer yes, but they didn't vote that way with their wallets. We're starting to see, you know, particularly, you know, Gen X and millennial parents, you know, take this to heart and really start to spend that way, so that I think I'd love to see it become much more than a niche category of some of these sustainable products that are manufactured out of recycled materials. You know, certainly increasing the recyclability of packaging, and you know, I think you have a couple of different ways you can go with toys. You can either go sort of the Lego route, which is, you know, this is something that's going to survive multiple generations and you can pass it down to your children, or it has to be something that, you know, is recyclable or reusable in some way, so that, you know, let's face it, we're parents and we're grandparents, and we really want to leave a better world for our children and grandchildren and future generations. You know, that's essentially the definition of sustainability. We want to, you know, ensure that, you know, future generations aren't left holding the bag, essentially, you know, from an environmental standpoint. So that, you know, I'd love to see us move further in that direction as an industry, and I think we will. I'm starting to see some very hopeful signs.
I don't think, I mean, there's not a one size fits all. I think what Lego would do would be very different to maybe Mattel or Hasbro, and further on down the line with those smaller companies. I think the solution is a mixture of all of these solutions that are out there. And if there is the opportunity to use materials, then fantastic. If there is the opportunity to use recycled materials, then even better. I think it's going to be an amalgamation of lots of very clever, innovative, new ways of doing things that's hopefully going to shift us forward. And it takes time to do that, doesn't it?
It does, although one of the other things we do as an association, we have a very close association with the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, and also Otis Art Institute in Los Angeles, and they both have toy design programs. And so we regularly go to speak to the students and talk to them about both product safety and sustainability. You know, hopefully we'll see a different mindset as some of these designers move up through the industry. I think they, you know, they come into it, I think, with a different mindset. And, you know, I think as they gain some expertise, I think we're going to see some real changes.
Totally. Let's hope so. Well, a huge thank you, Al, Valeria, Yesim, for being part of this and joining me today on this truly, truly interesting and fascinating conversation. And thank you to everybody at home that's watching. And let's hope that everybody that watches this, they can be inspired to go and try and make a piece of change in the office or at home, and actually start to drive the conversation to make that change. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye-bye.